On the bench today, we are going to get obsessive with OCD pedals. We've got this one, manufactured in California, serial number in the 120,000s. We've got this one, manufactured in his facility in Texas, serial number 429, special edition. And then we've got this one, manufactured in New York, probably, by Electro Harmonics. And it is essentially the same circuit as these two guys. The differences are, obviously, this one's got the germanium in it as the clipping devices. This one actually has a variable power supply inside, so you can switch it between 9 and 18 volts. These two guys on the back, it says you can input 9 or 18 volts into it. And then what we've got here, just out of shot slightly, is a ditto. And I recorded a riff earlier, and I've got it playing currently through a JCM 800, so it's pretty high gain amp. And let's have a look at some of the tones that we can get, or the tone difference between all three of these pedals. I've got them set up about the same. You can see that the gain on this one, the germanium, is set a little higher for what feels like, or I perceive, as about the same amount of gain going through them. These two are set about the same right now. Once we take them apart, we're going to learn the difference between the 18 volts and the 9 volts. And also we're going to, learn the difference about the clipping mechanism. So these are all hard clippers. And so this is germanium, and these two are MOSFETs, I believe. I'll check the parts later. And so let's have a look at the schematic now. I'm on the Analog Is Not Dead website, so there's a review here. The OCD, bit of history about the guy Mike Fuller from Fulltone. Created this, and he still builds them today. He moved from California, as I said earlier, to Texas. It's a 2 op-amp drive. Non-inverting, it looks like. Yep, non-inverting. And then this is the gain, set by this. This is the tone. Set by this guy. And then this is the volume output. And then there's a switch here that adjusts the value of these resistors, creating a different frequency response in this network. Here, so all straightforward stuff. And then you notice it's a hard clipper. I've got these MOSFETs here, and I believe they have slow switching speed, which gives them some of the characteristics of a soft clipper, and it's asymmetrical, it looks like, as well. So we've got a diode here as well. So we're going to analyze this part. We're going to put a signal generator in, and we're going to look at the output here, and then we're going to have a look at how this clipping stage affects the signal, and do a couple of frequency response tests, and look at the tone, and find out where this thing has been optimized in terms of filtering, and to give the tone that we just heard on the videos. We've got the tops off, so this is the original, and this is a version 1.7 signed, and there's a date here, so that looks like it's 2015, 12/23/2015, and then there's the op amp. This looks like the clippers could be around here, the MOSFETs and the diode, but we'll have to check when we get the circuit out. There's also a diode here. And then here's the tone, gain, etc., volume, and power supply. This is 2024, so everything's on the other side of the board. But we can see in there, they look like fancy germanium diodes. So I have to check those out, see where they clip at. And then this is different because it has a true bypass switch as well. So I'm assuming, and we'll check on the schematic, that this has got a buffer, or it might be a true bypass. I don't know. I'll check on the schematic, but this definitely has a buffer that you can bypass. And then the electro-harmonics one is surface mount. So that is the gain there, and this is the power booster chip that gives you the 18 or the 9 volt selection. And in fact, it was set to 18 volts. So what we heard earlier was the 18 volt setting. So once we start to get the signal generator on it, we can have a look at it. This looks like the clipping section here, D1, D2, but I'm not seeing an asymmetrical clip. It's supposed to be the MOSFET and a diode on one side, and then a MOSFET flipped over the other way around to do the other side of the clipping. So that's interesting. So once we get the scope out, we can verify that. So here we have them all. So what I'm going to do now is put the signal generator into this and start to poke around in the circuit. All right, plugged it in. I've got a signal generator putting about 100 millivolts peak to peak out. Got tone set to about halfway. Drive set to 0. Volume around here. And high pass on. So this is a 1 kilohertz sine wave, so it gets attenuated when you put the low pass on, and not so attenuated when you put the high pass on. And then if we change the tone, it has a moderate effect on 1 kilohertz. I'm suspecting it's a mids kind of pedal. Well, I know it's a mids kind of pedal from the sound demo that we did. So 1 kilohertz is around midish. And then once we turn up the drive, you can see, let's turn this volume down a little bit. You can see, I think, yeah, that's definitely an asymmetrical clip, isn't it? So if we turn it like this, and the center of the screen, that's a symmetrical sine wave, and then as we go up and we start to clip on the diodes, you can see the signal disappears off the top of the screen. So there's a higher clipping voltage on the positive swing than there is on the negative swing. So I suspect that the positive side is where we have the MOSFET and the diode clipper. And again, it's a little like a clone pedal as well. It's got this shark fin pedal. I think, again, I have to have a quick look at the schematic, but I think there's an integrator around the second op amp which takes away all the harsh edges caused by the clipping of the op amp and the clipping of the op amp stage. Let's go back to look at the schematic again. Here's the schematic, and I'm not seeing a buffer. This is our first gain stage here, so when we're turning up the gain, we were adjusting this guy, and both of these guys have some kind of integrating function around the outside. So what this does is this gives negative feedback in this path here for any high frequencies. So if you put a square wave in, it's going to kind of cut off the rising edges, and we get the shark fin, and they're both here. And it's very similar to the gain stage after the clipping on a clone pedal. Obviously the clone pedal is a lot more complex around here because it has a upper bypass and a lower bypass, and the gain and the amount of clean signal let through you can adjust with the same pot. It's 2 pots on 1 spindle. But that's the clone. Let's talk about this circuit. So I'm not seeing a buffer, although if we have a look at inside this guy, I can see there's a transistor there, there's a transistor there, there's a transistor there, and there's a diode there. There's another diode over here, and I'm not seeing that many diodes. I'm probably You know, you would think there would be one on here for reverse polarity protection, and there probably is. We can check all that. And but one of these transistors must be a buffer. I'm going to check that out. Check that out as well. Two of these transistors must be the MOSFETs and the diode, obviously. That looks like a small signal diode. And that looks like a power diode. So, like a 1N414 or whatever. So, I think we need to poke around in this circuit a little more and find out what's what. So, I've hooked up the scope probe here onto the output of the first gain stage, which is essentially the same line where the clipping diodes are. And I've got the gain now set quite low. So if I just go here, I can turn up the gain. And then I've also got the peak-to-peak voltage on as well, on the square in the corner. I don't know if you'll be able to read it on a small screen like a phone, but if you put it on your big screen TV, you should be fine. And so as I turn up the gain, i.e. we put more signal into the diode, into the clipping section, you can see we start to clip. So as suspected, it's just the transistor on the negative clip, and you can see it's starting to clip right away here. And then as I keep going, we see the upper clip, which is a diode and a transistor together. And I want to make a note of this, but we're completely clipped, i.e. that signal will never go higher than 680 millivolts, so let's remember that. And the blue is the output of the second op-amp and the tone section. And you see that integrator is working well. So here we have the square wave. We're driving the diodes really hard, switching on and off pretty rapidly. And then that capacitor around the outside of the op-amp, you can see it's removing those rising edges and smoothing them out, so we get this shark fin. So it's kind of it's converting that yellow square wave to the blue shark fin, the second section with the integrator caps. All right, so this will never go higher in that stage than 680 millivolts. So why would it be different with an 18-volt supply? That's a question I'd like to answer once we get moving along the line and get to some of the other pedals. So let's have a look now at the signal with the germanium, because germanium diodes have a much lower switching voltage than MOSFETs and diodes. So now I've got the germanium on the bench, and I got the settings about the same. First observation, you can see the blue trace there. It's lower amplitude, so there's not as much gain in this. So if I turn the volume up, I think we're looking at a signal about that size. And now let's turn the gain up, and we can see the clipping behavior of this thing is completely different. It was a shark fin on the other one, and now it's the upper side. So it's kind of a shark fin on the bottom, on the negative swing, but the upper one has this shelf, which means the filtering is slightly different. So let's play around with the filter. Once you get it past halfway at 1 kilohertz, there's no change after the gain. So I think we're slamming the first amp or the gain on the first amp is hit the rails once this is halfway. And now let's adjust the tone. If we turn the tone down, we kind of go to a shark fin at 1 kilohertz ish. And then as you continue to turn the tone up, oh yeah, this is a different pedal. The characteristics of this pedal are completely different at 1 kilohertz. You know, we should go and change the frequency. Why don't we try that? So hit frequency. So 2 kilohertz, pretty much the same. And then you can see the roll off. That's 9 kilohertz, it's rolling off. And let's take it down in frequency. The signal's getting bigger. At about 400, it's a bigger signal. and then back up to a kilohertz. So it's an interesting frequency response, but the signal remains about the same no matter where we are. And so the clipping characteristics of this pedal are completely different. So I have a probe here, and I saw some small signal, what looked like germanium. So I'll clip on there, and I can see something, but it's very small. I'd expect something a lot bigger. And you can see the peak to peak on the yellow is something like 60 millivolts. So that doesn't feel right. Poke around a little bit in here. Go on the gain pot. Oh, there's something. If I just clip on there. I don't know where this is in the signal chain though, but that's kind of something that you would expect. That's a hard clip there. So we're putting a sine wave in. So as we overdrive the op amp, because we're on the gain, you can see that's squaring off, and then that shape on the blue probably comes from the tone. Yeah. So that, I would say, is the equivalent of this guy. But you know, as you move the tone up, you get this different clip. Alright, I think I need to take it apart some more, because I can't even see, if I look on the back here in this area, I can't even see where the legs of the ICs would be. So I'm suspecting it's probably surface mount on the other side, a bit like the electro-harmonics. So we're going to have to take this board out, flip it over, and then explore around on the other side of the board and see if we can determine the same measurement points that we did on this guy. So here's the board, as suspected. It's all surface mount. This is the preamp, or sorry, the op amp here, this chip. Zoom in a little more. And then what looks like up here is the clipping section. And so we've got the tone set about halfway. And so if we roll the gain down to 0, we get the sine wave on the scope. If we turn the gain up, the diodes will start to clip. And so I think if I just touch on here, okay, that gain setting is less than the clipping, so we've got 130 millivolts. Turn the gain up a little more. Oh, clipped. And now we can see we've got clipping at 160 millivolts on this MOSFET here. So if I bring it closer, you can see we've got MOSFET 1, MOSFET 2, and then 2 germanium diodes here. Not quite sure how these are configured yet, but just touching on some of the pins here. We can see clippings occurring here at about 170 millivolts. Clipping occurs here 167 millivolts. And then if I go on here, you can hardly see the clip, but there is a clip there. And then I think I have to flip over. Oh, washer's just dropped off. I think I have to flip over to see the other side of that other diode there. Yeah, and you can see the clip in there. So what we've got to do actually is trace out the board a little and see how this clipping is configured, whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical, and where the diodes play and how they complement the MOSFETs. Okay, I've traced it out to a first order at least, and it's a symmetrical clipper, so it's not an asymmetrical clipper like the original OCD. So the signal comes in here, so you can see there, and then on the other one, which is facing the opposite direction, the other MOSFET, you can see it's there. So this one is got the voltage swing in one direction, this has got the voltage swing in the other direction, and then both of these MOSFETs have a corresponding small signal diode, which is here, which is a germanium. So first of all, it's definitely a symmetrical clipper. Maybe it's not, but it definitely looks like a symmetrical clipper, so that's very different from the original. And then of course the voltage drop across these germaniums is 0.3 volts or 300 millivolts as opposed to 700 millivolts, which would be the diode that's used in the original. So it's a completely different clipping set, different clipping section. You know, we're still using these slow MOSFETs to try and, you know, so it's not it's a hard clipper, but it's kind of not, and that's what the MOSFETs do. And then we've added an extra diode, so it becomes a symmetrical clipper at a lower voltage than an asymmetrical clipper. So quite interesting. I just want to check one last thing with the scope. So I've got it set up with the gain down right now. So if I turn the gain up, we can see that the blue trace touches the bottom of the oscilloscope screen before it touches the top. So it does have a little bit of asymmetrical stuff in there. I haven't got a schematic, so we're guessing on how it works. There could be some extra, there could be another voltage drop somewhere in there. And then let's turn the tone down so we get to our shark fin, and then increase the volume. Oh, volume's up. Increase the gain. It's within tiny millivolts of being asymmetrical, so I think it's symmetrical. But please comment, put something in the comments and let me know. Now let's move on to the electro-harmonics. And now this has an 18 volts and a 9 volt switch. And I think this is the pin here that we're interested in. So I've got it set to 18 and I'm measuring 17.3. So if I flick the switch, it goes down to 8.4ish. Let's put it back on 18, but look at the screen on the oscilloscope. That's the output, and you can see I've set the volume. I've set the volume here, so it's touching the top and the bottom. Put it onto 18 volts. So it's touching the top and the bottom. So first of all, it's symmetrical, and we'll prove that out. But you can see inside there's only two diodes, well, two MOSFETs. So that's my big giveaway. But the other thing is that let's adjust this so it's there. So that's 18 volts. Click it. Keep looking at the blue. You know, it's about the same when I go down to 9 volts. Maybe a little bit smaller. My contention is, of course, that we're dealing with a voltage drop of the MOSFETs that are set. And so if I grab the scope probe now and look here, the yellow is the clipping diodes. There we go. I'm on the clipping diode now. And so let's turn the gain up and down. Oh, that's the volume, sorry. Let's turn the gain up and down. So that's again reasonably low. And I turn it up. And then we start to clip. You see on the yellow, it flattens out on the top and the bottom symmetrically. And because it's a hard clipper, you never exceed that voltage, which is about 180 volts. Sorry, 160 millivolts. And that's with the gain on full, so it's hard clipping now. We're driving the op amp really hard. And then as we go back, you can see we get some lovely smooth edges, which will give us some of that harmonic content that we like, as opposed to the harsh harmonic content of these square waves. Now let's roll it back so it's just clipping, and let's flip this to 18 volts. And it clips about the same place. So the input of the second amplifier can never really exceed 160, 170 millivolts because of the hard clipping circuit. So I don't know what's going on there and why we have this 18 volt switch. Again, maybe one of you guys will know. If you could put the comment down below, that would be fantastic. But let's roll it back, 18 volts. So that's just where it clips there. Switch down to 9. It's the same. And this is at 1 kilohertz, of course, and that's back on 18 volts. And you can wind the volume up. Oh, that's again. Sorry, wind the volume up. And this also has. It's got the shark fin on this setting, but I did notice earlier. If we flip this thing over, play with the tone a little bit. You know, like with the tone full blast, it's a square wave. Take the tone down, it becomes more of a shark fin, and in the middle, it looks like that. And then we switch this switch. Pretty much the same, but smaller, but more. That is a little more like the clip of the germanium. So what I'm going to do now is hook them all up in a row, and we're just going to have a quick compare of similar settings and waveforms, and then conclude. So we've got them all hooked up. I have the classic version here, and I got the volume set just past halfway. I've taken the drive down to 0, and the output is just a sine wave, and that's what you can see in the blue. And then as you turn the drive up, we get the shark fin, if you remember from early on in the video. And you know, the drive feels at 1 kilohertz at least, feels like beyond halfway. It's the first preamp is clipping so hard, it's driving the diodes as much as it's going to do, and you're losing all those effects of the voltage drop across the MOSFETs beyond halfway because you're driving them so hard. They're just switching on and off. And then if we look at the tone, take the tone down, it still, you know, keeps a shark fin kind of waveform at 1 kilohertz. And go down in frequency, it's about the same. Up in frequency, we can see some roll off. Let's take it back down to a kilohertz. So, and then this is a high frequency attenuator. So that is the frequency response rolls off before 1 kilohertz, it looks like. Yeah, as I take it further down to about 300 hertz, you see the waveform's quite big now. Back to a kilohertz, and then back to normal. Alright, now let's look at the germanium. And immediately, so let's set it like the other one. So that's in the same position. And that is with the gain turned down and tone about center. And so this has got less gain. And so we're going to turn the volume up so it's about 3/4. And as we turn the gain up, you can see the clipping structures is different. And that's due to the germanium diodes with the MOSFETs. And then we change the tone. The top's really flattened off, and bring the tone down. And with the tone at 0, we're kind of getting the shark fin, or the similar waveform at 1 kilohertz as we did with the original. So this is interesting. And then turn it down, so we're just attenuating the 1 kilohertz when we put the high pass filter in. Now if we go to the glove, it's let's compare the glove to the original OCD. So that's set halfway. drive is set there, so they're about the same. So put the glove on. You see, this has got a different characteristic as well, because we did notice that when we opened this up, it had two MOSFETs, where this has a MOSFET and a diode, and so it's an asymmetrical clipper. And the characteristics of the clip circuit, if I turn it down, we kind of get a shark fin, and we reduce the gain, so we're a sine wave, and then you can see clip starts to happen. And that it's the feedback capacitor on the second amp that gives us this kind of shark fin on both of them, well, on all three of them. But again, it's a different type of distortion, even though the schematics are fairly similar. Almost similar to the germanium. So three very different pedals in terms of how they distort the signal and what the shape of the distort, or how the tone is shaped in the second stage. This one, all three of them are different, but the schematics are practically the same. This has an 18 volts switch. These can be used between 9 and 18 volts if you look on the back there, but it's kind of I'm not yet clear, and maybe you can help me understand what the benefit of the 18 volt setting is, if the clip's always going to be limited to the voltage of the diodes, the forward voltage of the diodes. I'm going to check the schematic before I publish this, so let's see what happens in the next scene. So I pulled up the schematic, and here's the clipping network. And so Vref is half the voltage supply. So I measured it as well. So when I'm on 18 volts, Vref is about 8.7 and 4.5. And we measured it earlier here as well, if you remember. But it kind of acts like a ground. You know, once it passes through this capacitor here, the sine wave, or the waveform, is oscillating across a plus 4.5 and a minus 4.5, or plus or minus 9 voltage rail. So that would be good. You would get clean headroom. Apart from this thing here is a complete roadblock, because these voltages, I mean, these MOSFETs are gonna they're going to conduct at a certain voltage, forward voltage, and clip. So once you get past here, you can't see really any change in voltage. It's marginal. Apart from we bypass these guys at certain frequencies with this filter network here, that could cause some change. So what I'm going to do is run some frequency response tests. So given what we just discussed in the schematic, I just ran a bunch of frequency response tests. And so I've got it hooked up here, and then I'm alternating between 9 and 18 volts. So if you look on the computer screen here, that is 18 volts. Nine volts, back to 18, and it doesn't change. And then I change the tone, and so it's got a different curve, different tone shape, but between the two they're identical, 18 volts, 9 volts. And then if I turn the gain up full, so I'm diming it, this is 18 volts, and this is 9 volts. And there's the change. So for certain, when we overdrive the pedal a lot, with a lot of gain, this is around a kilohertz here. So this thing's voiced actually to have the highest peak around 400 hertz. But we've got this line here, and when we pass through here, I don't know if you can see it. That's the 1 kilohertz line. So 18 volts, better. 9 volts, worse. So interesting. I don't know if you can hear that. I did try some measurements earlier just on the scope as well. And with 18 volts, with the 18 volt switch on, you know, around 400 hertz, I did see a peak to peak voltage difference of about 0.15 millivolts on a scale of about 4 volts. I don't know if you can hear that. So it's interesting. It's this 18 volt operation has got me perplexed. I did have a look on some forums as well, and some people can hear some difference and some people can't. So I don't know. Analytically, there's not much in it when you do some measurements. And so I'm going to conclude with that thought. It's going to be on my mind for a while now, and try and think up some different measurements to be able to understand what the difference between 9 volt operation and 18 volt operation. And usually, you know, in a soft clipper, it can work a lot better, because you're just dealing with feedback around an op amp, and with a higher voltage you get a higher headroom. But here in this hard clipper, we're just clipping the signal. It will never go over a certain voltage because of the MOSFETs in this case, or the diodes, you know, in other pedals. The clone, now that'll respond to different voltages, but actually it's set to 24 volts because it's got some clean paths that go around the outside of the hard clipping circuitry. So I'm going to conclude with that. Let me know your thoughts, and please like and subscribe.